Well done. So moving on, let's talk about history of towers. So we have on the, you're right, Miss Van der Rohe, which practically is the person who, as you know, he invented the glass box. And he is the father of modernism and the international style. He did that in 1933, and the building you can see underneath is actually a very typical example of the international styles in the States that then came later to England. Now, you're going to be wondering, what does 1933 has to do with 1953? And actually, this is the time where towers start getting constructed in England. So it was a situation that after the war, there was a new queen, the spirit has been lifted, and in 1953 the Churchill government actually decided to help the construction industry and to help the developers by giving 10% extra if they were developing a building that has been demolished or there was something wrong with it during the war. So by 1956, also because there was a famous act, the London Building Act, that no building should be higher than 20 meters high, nobody was able actually to build any towers. There were only 2 buildings at the time that they were above 30 meters, and they were claiming that the upper story were storage. So by 1956, this act got abolished. And then by 1959, we actually had the 3 first towers in London that exceed 100 meters. Unfortunately, in 1964, there was the Brown Act that no towers were able to build anymore. But nevertheless, in these 3 years, we have the 3 towers that are above 100 meters is Millbank Tower, Portland House, and the Cell Tower. And it's really interesting. Millbank Tower, we have an office there. You can see that it is an international style, but it still has a twist in the design. And the twist is that it curves at the front. So it's not, yes, it keeps the podium, the glass podiums. Yes, it keeps the typical glass box with the curtain wall, not structural, but just glass all around. But then it does curves around. So this is the difference. And Portland House, very important as well, because it's like a father of the brutalistic design that happened later on. So the same design for Portland House, actually 3 buildings got constructed at the time, one in Milan, one in New York, and the other one in London. And the Cell Tower, I like this very much because, and I like the story, because Sir Robertson and Ralph Smith was an artist actually, and they collaborated together to make this building. So they worked really, really hard in order to make a tower that look a bit more English and it doesn't just copy the typical American towers. What they end up is with the Cell building. When they exhibit it as a model, people hate it. Totally. They didn't like it, they thought that it's not modernist enough, they thought that it doesn't give, it's not enough contemporary. And then just a few more examples. Certain Point, this is a really good piece of architecture, and the reason for this is that the facade is load-bearing. So it is a tower, it's a really thin tower, but then because the facade is load-bearing, then everything is being supported from the dinosaur legs. Dinosaur legs, by the way, it's a professional term, I didn't know either. But it's supporting on dinosaur legs that is going down, but it's a pioneer design for the time that it got built in 1965. And Hilton Hotel, we all know it, is again, this is the closest to American international style that exists at the time. It's just that it has 3 wings instead of having 1. So these are the good towers, let's say, that have been constructed. On the other point of view, we have the other side of the post-war Britain, where the council actually took it upon them to build houses for the people that they were homeless or they didn't live in good conditions at the post-war, and actually they start creating the ex-council flat in towers. Now, this started with the idea of Le Corbusier, and it started quite nicely. I mean, it had this vision that everybody's going to live harmoniously together in these big towers, and you can see that they have playgrounds, they have pools on top and everything. But unfortunately, what happened is in 1956, the government gave a very big funding for tower blocks. Therefore, every council was building only tower blocks. And then when these tower blocks, when the funding finished, then they start decline. And what they start decline is that they didn't stop building them, but actually it was the quality of the design and the structure that declined. So that was the biggest problem. And what happened is that even that lasted for 10 years, we have already 350 of these blocks around London only. We have everywhere in the country, but in London only we have 350 of these blocks. And people, they don't really want to live there anymore. I mean, there were so much bad publicity about all the facilities inside. They were vandalized. There were places where it was almost horror to live in. I mean, the families with the young kids, they didn't want to go on the upper floors because of the dangers for the kids to fall down. The lifts were full of problems, and people were trapped, all the older people were trapped, and all of this. But the situation is, and the question is really, what are we going to do with them? Because we do have quite a few. I mean, the worst thing that happened after this is that one of these towers, the Roman Point, it actually collapsed in 1968, and it collapsed through an explosion, and from this explosion then the side of the building practically went down completely, and this is pure to the bad quality of materials that have been used and to bad workmanship as well. So what is the situation? What's the solution to this? Is it to demolish? I mean, this building, it's a building in Scotland, and to be honest with you, the only reason this building became famous is because of the demolition. Before, nobody really wanted to live in it. Or is it to renovate? We have a famous example, the Parson House. Actually, it was a really, really bad construction, and what's happening is that 10 years after it got constructed, it was so bad that the window frames were coming out of the frame and falling on the floor, with dangers to kill so many people. And what happened is that the council called this architect, Mr. Bell, and said to him, can you renovate it? He came back with the idea of renovation, and it cost 4 times the budget of the council. But the only reason that they proceed with that is that because to remove all the people from the block somewhere else and then demolish it and rebuild it and then bring them back, it was so much hassle. Therefore they decide. And the good thing is that this happened in 1990s, by the way. And you can see that the new cladding and also the steel beams coming up and the creation of the roof, it makes it look almost iconic, and it definitely makes it look so much better from what it was before. So the difference between demolition and renovation on these towers. Demolition, of course, it is a cheaper option. But then if we consider factors like that, moving the tenants, and it's not only housing tenants, it can be office tenants, it can be, if it's the hotel and need renovation, it can be anything. Moving them and then up somewhere else and then bring them back after the demolition, the design, the planning, the bringing back the building, it is a lot of hassle. The other thing is that, which is really important, is the condition of the existing structure. And this is something that nobody can tell for sure if after 50 building the structure is still viable or not. This has to be indicated for the particular building, has been tested on the lab, and then yes, some of the buildings that have been built quality with good quality materials, they might last for 50 more years, some of them not. And from the other point of view, renovation is a much more sustainable option, and it is much more sustainable. I remember 10 years ago, I was in a lecture with Norman Foster. Norman was my boss at the time, and he gave a lecture for an hour and a half purely on carbon emission from demolition of the buildings. And then at the end, he ended up in a situation that he said, it's better not to demolish them. It's better if we can save something, renovate it, then let's save it, because it really helps the environment. And the other important thing for the renovation is the surrounding area. So if a tower is somewhere that is in a good location and then it's surrounded by a lot of buildings around it, then it's really a hassle to actually protect every single building and then plan the demolition and then check how long the demolition will take, what the negatives, sometimes it might take 6 months, sometimes it might take a year. So it's better to renovate this building. And the other thing is that people will know it. So people will know it. Yes, it has a bad name or a good name, but then it's good to keep something because it's part of the history. From the other point of view, the people that they decide to demolish them, so the developers that they say, yes, we are going for the demolition and the new design, then they are claiming that it's going to bring the regeneration of the area, new job opportunities, and new everything. But then if we take the designs that they are in London nowadays, we can see that more or less they are the same glass box that Miss Van der Rohe and Le Corbusier created. And if it's not a glass box, it is a brick box that is coming up, or a cylinder coming up. And there is no much diversion. I mean, this is the future of Vauxhall. You can see that so many glass boxes, vertical, they are going up on the sky. This is the future of Southern and how it's going to look. And there is a big component to consider, which I don't think that it has been considered at any given point in those designs. And this is the new generation, the millennials. Why they matter? Because by 2020, they are going to be 50% of the workforce, and by 2030, 75%. And what they aspire is to make a difference. And what they like, actually, it is parametric design. And parametric design, you can see, it turns around, it's curvier, it comes from the nature. I mean, it comes from a leaf, very bad photo, snowflake, coastline, God knows where it is. But it's much more closer to the nature, and it breaks away from the square box. It brings the architecture actually one step forward away from Miss Van der Rohe. And all the architectural school are actually teaching parametric design, which this has to tell us something, that the new generation actually it is very much up to this kind of design rather than what it was designed in 1933. Londoners' opinion that the Gherkin is their favorite building with 36%. Guess what? The Gherkin was a form of parametric design, maybe the first one in the past. And Draper's Garden, these two buildings, they are going for demolition. But to be honest with you, if you see the new design and if you examine the new design, they don't really look much different from what it was there before and we actually demolished it. So, could renovation work with parametric? I'm going to show you very quickly two case studies for this. So, the first case study is the Tower 42. You can see it has a very large core, and then the floor plates are not big enough. When the tower got first constructed, NatWest didn't move all their stuff in there because they needed bigger floor plates. So the tower was not commercial enough. What we propose for this, we propose to make a facade that is actually a clever facade and it carries the loads down. It is a parametric facade, but with this way we can have all the floor plates expanding in different sizes and make it much more commercially viable for the purpose of the tower, and also give it a much more sexier design. I know that because all the guys they see this tower, they always say to me, oh, it looks like a lady's body. So anyway, so you can see how it curves, and the good thing actually is that from the people on the street it looks different. So from every street it looks like it is a different building. It has a garden for environmental reason every 10 stories, and this is how it looks inside. So it really brings a feeling that it is a building for the future. The criticism that we got for this tower, it was that yeah, the design looked good, but actually it cannot be stunned. This is terribly wrong, and I'm terribly sorry, but this building has been built in 1965 with exactly the same construction, and it still stands. So if the one can stand, then definitely the other one can stand as well. So what if SARD was parametric? I mean, for me, I think that if we call it SARD, then it has to look more like a SARD. So it has to look much more like a SARD. If we go back, we can call it a pyramid, yes, but definitely for a SARD, it has to be much more adventurous, and especially for the size of the building and for the amount of years that this building is gonna stay in London. So, how to keep London on the map? Listen to your audience and what your audience say. And if your audience likes parametric design, then I think that the whole construction industry, not only the developers, but even the suppliers, they need to work more on this. It's funny because they say National Council of Non-Profits. However, I think that the profit ones, they should follow the audience advices. And you see that parametric structures, they are turning around, they are from different materials, they are dynamic, they are flowing, they are much more interesting rather than the standard box. And the standard box has its dates, and actually it lasted for almost 100 years. So if we do change the architecture to a much better, better, I mean, it really depends on what people like, but as it seems, this is what they like, and this is what the future should be. And for the people that are saying it cannot get built, nowadays we have actually 3D structures that they can build a home or a building, and you can see it's the same as we do 3D models, but they can actually even build a whole building. So we have this, we can even build 3D cakes. So yeah, so I think that, is it gonna be a bit more expensive? Yes, it is. Will people willing to pay more just to live or work there? Then definitely they will. So I would like to finish and go to your competition, but before that I would like to say that let's not repeat the mistake of the past, and let's listen to our audience, and let's start building a more adventurous design. These are just some of the latest awards that we won for this tower, and it hasn't even got planning yet, but that's it. Thank you very much.
Round of applause for Debbie Flevotomou. Thank you very much. Big round of applause. We're going to pick the winner. Pick the winner. Drum roll, please.
Oh, I really like this one, but it fell apart. Oh, I really thought
That's the one that's actually standing up, I think.
yes. Okay, you know what? I think we can pick 3.
3?
Yay! 3. So definitely this one that got collapsed. We can pick this one.
This one here?
Yes. And let me see. And this one, because it's very parametric, the ground actually has been lifted. Okay, so can we have the winners of the collapsing one?
A round of applause, please.
Yay! Of the parametric ground one.
Parametric, up you come. Quick. Can't get out, jeez. Round of applause, please.
Of the tall one.
And last but not least, which one?
Yes, the tall one. And this one, it takes honorable mention because it's really good. Can we have the winner of this one coming up as well?
Okay, quick.
Okay.
Massive round of applause. Was that good? That was very good, wasn't it? It was very good indeed. Thank you very much. That brings to the end of day 1. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Isn't it wonderful?